Hi Grandma, this is part 3 of Eastern Canada. So we started from New York, went up through Montreal and Quebec City, which were just beautiful. Then we shot east over into New Brunswick and a park called Couchibuwak. And we went, followed the coast down south until we got to Prince Edward Island. And we went counterclockwise all the way, no, we went clockwise all the way around that island. And then we ended up in Sydney, Nova Scotia. And that's where the ferry leaves. So we took the ferry over to Newfoundland. It ends up at Port aux Basques. And we went through Grosmorn Park in Newfoundland, and then we worked our way around that island clockwise until we got to St. John's in Newfoundland. And that was the furthest point we went. We had to go all the way back to Port aux Basques to take the ferry back over to Nova Scotia. That was like a midnight ferry. So we're now in Sydney and we're getting ready to start the Nova Scotia portion of the tour. All right, here's some videos on that. Bye. We drove immediately from Sydney to Louisbourg, and this is an 18th century France living history museum at a fort, and they have all these people dressed up and they fire muskets, and it was kind of fun. From Louisbourg, we drove north to Baddock to see these falls called Usage Falls, and it was a short hike. The Alexander Graham Bell Museum is also here, and he did so many inventions and had so many ties to other inventors that we would see later as we toured the East Coast. So this was really fun. From Baddock, we drove counterclockwise around this famous road called the Cabot Trail. And it's just a beautiful scenic drive that follows the coastline up and around Nova Scotia. Tons of little spots to get out and hike, local vendors, that kind of thing. And super, super pretty. We had great weather for it as well. This is a specific hike called Skyline Trail. It's still part of that Cabot Trail location, but it just overlooks this really nice pass. It's very popular. There's this big boardwalk that leads down to these cliffs that overlook the water, and it's just gorgeous. As you come off the Cabot Trail, the next stop is near Mabou. We went to this distillery, had some really good tastings and some nice music. And then we went to Mabou, which was, well, a local had recommended it to us. And it was just stunning. Beautiful grasslands, everything was green, wildflowers were blooming. Honestly, it was my happy place. Just absolutely beautiful. The pictures don't do it justice. From Mabou, we made a really long drive over to Halifax, which is probably the biggest town in Nova Scotia. We parked and slept in a cruise ship parking lot, and we hit Dirty Nellie's Irish pub. But we also tried to take in some culture. We visited some churches and went to this military museum that sat on top of the hill. After checking out the architecture, we went to a maritime museum, and they talked a lot about the Halifax explosion of 1917. These were two ships that collided. One had explosives on board, and it was the biggest man-made explosion prior to the atomic bomb. So a lot of people were killed, housing lost. It was really awful. The Titanic sank near Halifax, so a lot of the recovery for the Titanic was done here. And here's Doug trying to make light of things, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Our next stop is a place called Peggy's Cove. It's a very popular day trip from Halifax, so a lot of tour buses drop off here. But we were actually able to stay at this lighthouse overnight and then wake up the next morning and see Peggy's Cove and its famous lighthouse without any people around. So it was really pretty. Just up the road was this memorial to Swissair Flight 111, which crashed in the area. Nobody survived, and recovery efforts happened here. From Lunenburg, we started north until we hit Hampton Harbor on the Bay of Fundy. The Bay of Fundy is known to have the largest tides in the world, so they can differ by like 50 feet. So you'll see the boats kind of sitting in the harbor at one moment, and then the tides come in and they're way, way up on the harbor. It was really interesting. This was just a little hike called Muir Point in the area, just for a pretty look at the area. We were on the Bay of Fundy for a while now and headed to Burnt Coat Head Park. So their claim, of course, is that you can walk along the ocean's floor. So when the tide's out, you can go out and walk. It's really slimy, slippery. I actually fell here. But then the tide comes in really fast because, again, it can change rather quickly and you can't walk out there. So it's kind of fun to see. And this happens over and over again along the Bay of Fundy. There's lots of places to stop and check this out. Leaving Burnt Coat Head, we boondocked on this beach, and it's one of the things we love about Canada. There's just great places to stay, really beautiful. You just pull off on the side of the road and no one bothers you. And this is Bailey. She loves digging in the sand. So this was a fun evening and just a nice day. Working so hard. Know what you're doing. Hey, Bailey. Bailey, what are you doing? What's happening? All right. Hopewell Cape, another place to see the Bay of Fundy. Very, very popular. A lot of tour buses get off here. You can see how muddy it is when you're walking around when the tide's out. And you get to see these flower pots, which are really, really pretty in this area. And then the tide comes in, and of course, you can't walk around there at all. In addition to seeing these huge tides, there's a national park here. So we did a few walks, pretty little waterfalls, and nice wooded areas. This cute little weasel thing was pretty curious about Doug for a long time, and we saw a lot of unusual mushrooms and plants in the area too. Our scenic drive the next day was socked in, but we finally made it to this location called Big Salmon River. It cleared up a little bit and we were able to cross this massive, massive hanging bridge. I only went partway across because it was so long and pretty scary, but Doug really enjoyed it. That night we boondocked again at a really pretty beach just outside of St. John. St. John's claim to fame is a quote-unquote reversing river. Again, it's just the Bay of Fundy that comes in really fast and it makes the water look like it's going upstream. But what I really liked was the town. Just pretty flowers, great historic buildings, cute parks, pretty churches. It was just a wonderful little Nova Scotia town. Our last major stop in Nova Scotia was St. Andrews. We had a little accident cooking oatmeal and it sprayed all over the RV in the morning. So we had early drinks on the beach and then checked out the town. This was recommended to us by a friend of ours who actually grew up in St. Andrews. And very tiny town, but quaint and picturesque. And sadly, it was about time to leave. And after seeing this Algonquin resort, we crossed the border in through Maine.